Picture a world where every single adult you know has watched someone die badly. Not in a hospital, not behind a curtain, in front of them, in the mud, in the bed beside them, in the road. Now fill that world with church bells that ring for the dead so often that children learn to count corpses before they learn to count sheep. Add famine that ate 1/10 of the country when your parents were young. Soldiers who take your grain at sword point and call it the king's right, and a disease coming up the roads from the coast that kills a healthy man between one Sunday and the next. That's England in the 14th century, the most Christian kingdom in the world, people said. A green and watered land, people said. Also a place where you could bury your entire family in 1 week and be back behind the plough the next, because the ploughing doesn't care. We're going back there tonight. Not as historians arguing about mortality rates, we're living it. One person, one village, one long stretch of days. Everything he would have seen, smelled, heard, carried in his hands, and carried afterward in his head. Because that's the real subject tonight. Not just what happened to medieval people, what it did to them. Why the man behind the plough flinches at hoofbeats. Why the woman at the well can't stop washing her hands. Why an entire civilization learned to sleep with one ear open. So, I make these history stories and honestly, I still have no idea whether anyone actually sleeps to them or whether you're all just lying in the dark enjoying detailed descriptions of medieval mass graves. Either way, subscribe if you want. Get comfortable. Here we go. You hear the hoofbeats before anyone else does. That's not a talent, it's a wound. Your ears have been trained by things that happened to you, and now they never fully close, not even when you're asleep. Right now you're standing in a half-ploughed field at first light with your hands on the plough handles, and every muscle between your shoulder blades has gone rigid. Because somewhere beyond the hedgerow, on the road from Coventry, a horse is coming. More than one. Ridden horses. Ridden horses move differently from a peddler's nag or the miller's cart pony. They come on with a purpose, a hard rhythm, iron shoes striking the packed clay of the road like someone knocking on a door they intend to open whether you answer or not. And in your world, in this year of grace 1348, riders on the road mean exactly 3 things. The Lord's men come to take. The King's men come to take more, or news. And you have learned, in 19 years of life, that news is almost never good. Good things don't ride. Good things stay home. Your name is Wet. Walter. Properly, Walter at Green. Because your family's toft sits at the edge of the village green, but nobody has called you Walter since the priest baptized you. You're 19 years old, and you are a ploughman in a village of maybe 40 households in the middle of England, and your hands are already an old man's hands. Look at them gripping the plough. The knuckles are thick. There's a split along the side of your right thumb that opens every winter and never quite heals until May, and when the cold gets into it, it burns like a coal. The palms are yellow with callus hard as horn, and this morning they ache, because they always ache at first grip, every single morning, until the work warms them. The oxen have stopped. They felt you stop through the traces before you knew you'd stopped. 8 of them, yoked in pairs, standing in the cold with their breath pouring out their nostrils in white columns, steam rising off their backs into air that smells of turned earth and dung and frost. The near ox, the big pied one they call Gartho, swings his head around to look at you with one huge wet eye, as if to ask why the pulling has stopped. Because pulling is the entire content of his mind. You can't answer him. You're listening. Beside you, Hob the ox boy has gone still too. He's 11. He walks at the head of the team with a goad, singing to the oxen because oxen pull better to a voice. That's a real thing. Plough teams across England are sung to like babies. And he has stopped singing mid-word. He's watching your face to know how frightened to be. That's what children do here. They don't ask what's wrong. They read the nearest adult like weather. The hoofbeats swell, hang for a moment at the bend where the road passes the churchyard, and then, thank Christ, fade. Going on, going north, toward the Abbey lands, somebody else's trouble. You breathe out. Your heart is slamming against your ribs anyway, uselessly, the way it always does, a fist pounding on a door after the danger has already left. Your body never gets the message in time. It arms itself in an instant and then takes half the morning to stand down, and in between you feel sick and cold and strangely ashamed, though you couldn't say of what. Riders, Hob says. Gone, you say. Who was it? Nobody. Sing. He sings. The oxen lean into the yokes, 8 bodies taking the strain in one slow surge, and the plough bites, and the world narrows back down to the thing in your hands. Understand what a plough is, in your world. Not a symbol, a machine. The biggest, most complicated machine most people will ever touch. An oak beam as long as a man is tall, an iron-shod coulter that cuts down into the soil like a knife into a pie crust, a share behind it that slices under the sod, and a curved wooden mouldboard that lifts the cut earth and rolls it over in one long unbroken wave. When it's going right, the furrow peels away from the mouldboard with a sound like tearing cloth, a wet, rich, ripping whisper, and the smell that comes up out of the opened ground is the oldest smell you know: cold iron, crushed roots, worms, rot, and something underneath all of it that is simply the smell of the earth's own body, dark and mineral and faintly sweet. When it's going wrong, the share hits a buried stone and the whole plough bucks like a living thing, and the handles slam back into your palms hard enough to split them, and if you're careless, hard enough to break a wrist. You are never careless. You know this field, the long furlong, 40 strips of it, and you know where the stones sleep the way you know where the scars are on your own arms. You lean on the handles, correcting, always correcting. The plough wants to wander. The soil is heavier on the low side of the strip where the water sits, lighter on the ridge, and you feel the difference come up through the oak into your wrists as pressure, as resistance, as a language your hands learned before your mind did. Left palm pressing down, right palm easing. The furrow runs straight. It has to run straight. A crooked furrow steals seed room, and everyone can see it, and everyone judges it. In a village this small, your ploughing is your face. By the time the sun is properly up, a pale coin behind cloud giving light but no heat, you have sweated through your shirt and the sweat has gone cold on your spine, and your feet, wrapped in wool and stuffed into shoes that are mostly patches, have passed through pain into a dangerous numbness you keep checking on, wriggling your toes at the end of each furrow like counting children. Losing toes to frost is not a story. Old Simon at the mill has 3 on his left foot. He lost the others the winter of the great rains, and he'll show you the smooth stubs if you ask, and he'll tell you about that winter if you're fool enough to let him start. The winter of the great rains. The famine. You need to know about the famine because it's the first key to everything I'm going to show you tonight. The first heavy stone laid on the shoulders of every adult in this village. It started before you were born, in 1315, when the rain came in May and simply did not stop. Not for weeks, not for months. The wheat rotted standing. The hay could not be cut, so the animals starved, and then the rain came again the next year, and the harvest failed again, and then a cattle plague swept through and killed the oxen, the plough teams, the machines, the entire engine of food. And for 7 years England ate itself hollow. In some places 1 person in 10 died. In some places worse. Your mother lived through it as a girl. She has never once described it to you. What she does instead is this. She cannot see bread fall on the floor without her whole body going still. Not angry, still. She picks it up, kisses it, the way you'd kiss a relic, and eats it, no matter what it fell in. Every crust in your house is eaten. Every crumb is swept from the table into a waiting palm and tipped into a mouth. Once, when you were small and stupid, you threw a heel of loaf to the dog, and your mother hit you across the face, 1 blow, harder than she'd ever hit you before or since, and then she sat down on the bench and shook, not crying, shaking, looking at something that wasn't in the room. You didn't have a word for that. Nobody in your world has a word for that. But you knew, even at 6, that you had not been hit by your mother. You had been hit by the year 1316. That's the thing to hold on to tonight, as we walk through this one long day and the terrible season that follows it. These people don't have our words. Nobody here will ever say trauma. They say a man is mazed, or not himself since, or that he has been affrighted, and the fright never left. The priest says some souls are wounded like bodies are wounded. The old women say fear can get into the blood, the way cold gets into a wall, and stay there. They don't have the diagnosis, they have the thing itself, and they have it everywhere. At the end of the furrow you halt the team, and the oxen stand blowing, and you straighten your back 1 hand width at a time, because it doesn't straighten any other way, and you look down the field at what you've done. 8 furrows, a dark corduroy of turned earth, steaming faintly, gulls already dropping onto it to stab at worms, screaming their thin ugly screams. 19 years old, and to stand fully upright first thing costs you a grunt through the teeth. And there's a place low on the right side of your back that feels like a knot in wood, and it will be there when you're 40 if you see 40. Most men here don't dwell on whether they'll see 40. It isn't despair, it's arithmetic. What? Hob, at the head of the team, has gone still again. Not the rider stillness, something else. He's looking past you toward the village, and you turn and you see it too. Smoke, not hearth smoke. Every roof in the village leaks its thin grey thread at this hour. That's just morning. This is a column, black at the root, boiling up fast from somewhere near the far end of the street, and even from 3 furlongs away you can hear it now that you're listening, a sound like wind where there is no wind. Thatch. Somebody's roof is burning, and this is how a village dies in an hour, and everyone knows it, because everyone has heard of it happening 2 parishes over, and this is how you learn that in your world there is no such thing as somebody else's fire. You leave the plough standing in the furrow. You should not do that. An abandoned plough is a sin against the field, and the reeve will have words. But your legs are already running, and Hob is running behind you, and the oxen stand abandoned in their yokes, chewing, monumentally indifferent. Running in ploughed clay is like running in a nightmare. The earth grabs your feet. Each stride sinks and sucks, and your breath goes ragged in 10 paces, and the cold air scrapes your throat raw, and all the time the black column ahead of you thickens and leans with the wind, and your mind, without permission, is doing what it always does, running the tally. Whose house? Count the roofs. The smoke is past the church, past the well. That's the far row. That's the Aldith Toft or the Cox or... No, it's the Cox. Marjorie Cock, widow. 2 children, a house of 1 room and a byre end. A roof of old thatch, grey and rotten. Thatch that everyone in the village has looked at for 2 years and thought, that roof wants renewing, and nobody renewed it, because a widow pays with eggs and prayers. By the time you come off the field onto the street, half the village is already there, and the house is already lost. Understand what fire means here, because it is nothing like a fire in your world. Every house on this street is a wooden frame packed with woven sticks and daub, wearing a hat of dry reed and straw a foot thick, a hat soaked in 20 years of soot and grease, because there is no chimney, there is only a hole, and every meal ever cooked in that house has painted the underside of that roof with fuel. A house like this doesn't catch fire, it detonates in slow motion. The Cock House is a single roaring throat of flame from end to end, and the sound of it is the thing you will remember. A huge hollow breathing roar punctuated by cracks like whips as the hazel rods burst, and under it a hiss, a horrible frying hiss, which is the daub sweating and the thatch spitting, and the heat comes off it in a wall you can feel 40 feet away, tightening the skin of your face like a hand pressing on it. Nobody is trying to save the Cock House. That decision was made in the first minute by everyone at once without a word. Every bucket, every person is aimed at the 2 houses either side of it, because burning straw is rising off the roof in whole flaming sheets, lifting on the fire's own wind, sailing, and where each sheet lands it must be found and killed within moments, or the whole row goes, and then the village goes. Someone shoves a wet sack into your hands. You don't see who. You spend the next stretch of time. You could not say how long. Time does strange things. It goes wide and flat. Everything very slow and very sharp at once. On the roof of the Aldith house, straddling the ridge with your thighs clamped on scratching reed, beating out embers. The sack is heavy with well water, and swinging it is like swinging a dead pig, and each blow lands with a sodden thump and a burst of steam and sparks, and your palms are past pain, and your eyes are streaming, and the smoke keeps swinging over you in a choking grey tide that tastes of burnt grease, and something sweeter underneath that you refuse to name. Below you, the street is a machine of buckets. Every soul in the village over the age of 5 is in the line from the well, and the well windlass is screaming on its axle, and the priest is in the line too, sleeves rolled, passing buckets like anyone, and the reeve is bellowing, and Marjorie Cock is sitting in the mud of the street with a child clamped under each arm, and she's not making a sound. That's the detail your eyes keep going back to between embers. Both children alive. She got them out. Her hands are burned. You can see even from the ridge that her hands are wrong, red and grey, and she got them out, and now she is sitting in the mud watching everything she has ever owned turn into light and noise, and her face is the face of a woman listening to a sermon in a language she doesn't speak. The house burns for less time than you'd think. An hour, maybe, from raw to ruin. What's left by mid-morning is a black steaming rectangle, a few charred posts like rotten teeth, the stone of the hearth. The hearth survives. Hearths always survive. There is a bitter joke in that somewhere, and a smell that has already soaked into the whole street, and will live there for weeks. Burnt thatch, burnt wool, burnt daub, and the village stands around it, 60 or 70 people, black-faced, hands blistered, coughing, and the sound now is worse than the roar was. The sound now is one of Marjorie's children, the little one screaming on and on, that high saw blade note that goes straight through the ear into the spine, and nobody tells her to hush. Here is what happens next, and I want you to watch it closely, because this is the machinery this whole world runs on. Before noon, Marjorie Cock and her children are inside the Aldith house, the house you sat on, the house that lived, and old Mother Aldith is smearing goose grease and honey on the widow's hands and binding them in linen that used to be somebody's shift. By evening, there is a sack of barley by the door that no one saw arrive. Within a week, the men of the village will be cutting timber on their one free day, and the wattle will go up, and a new roof, poorer, smaller, but a roof, before the frosts come hard. Not because the village is kind, though some of them are, because everyone here holds the same knowledge in their bones. Next time it's your roof. The village is a body. When one part burns, the whole body moves. There is no other safety net in existence. There is no insurance, no parish relief worth the name, no anything, except 60 people who know that a widow left in the mud in October is a corpse by Candlemas, and that a corpse of that kind is a sin the whole village would wear. You climb down off the Aldith roof with your arm shaking so hard you can barely grip the ladder poles. On the ground, your legs go loose and strange, and you have to lock your knees. Your palms, when you finally look at them, have blisters rising along the callus line, taut little domes of fluid, and one has torn open, and the raw skin under it is shockingly pink, baby pink, obscene against the black filth of the rest of your hand. "You're burnt," says a voice, and it's Alice Webster, 17, the weaver's daughter, with a smear of soot across her jaw like a thumbprint and her eyes red-rimmed from smoke. You've been circling each other, you and Alice, for a year, a circling made of nothing you could testify to. Standing near each other at church, 2 words at the well, once, at the harvest ale last year, a dance, and her hand in yours for the length of it, dry and warm and calloused along the fingertips from the shuttle. And you have thought about that hand more than you would ever admit under oath. It's nothing, you say, which is what a man says. She takes your wrist, just takes it, no permission asked, her grip surprisingly strong, and turns your palm to the light and looks at it the way the reeve looks at a strip of barley, assessing, unsentimental. "Wash it at the well," she says, "not the ditch, the well. And don't break the others open. They weep less if they break on their own." Then quieter, not looking up from your hand, "You were on the roof. I saw you. Someone had to be. Half the village had to be. You were." She lets go of your wrist. The place where her fingers were feels marked, warmer than the rest of you, and you carry that warm bracelet of feeling all the way to the well like something that might spill. The fire has eaten the day's ploughing. There's no going back to the long furlong now. The light will be gone before the team is set again, and besides, the whole village is wrung out, moving through the afternoon like people wading. But there is no such thing as a day off, so you spend what's left of the light doing the other work, the endless other work, hauling water for the beasts, forking soiled straw out of the byre with the ammonia stinging your eyes, splitting firewood in the yard with a maul whose handle is polished glassy by your father's hands and his father's, each swing jolting your torn palm so that you hiss and swing again, mucking, bending, lifting. Your body does it all without being asked. That's what a body is here, a tool that runs on bread and habit. And all afternoon, under everything, one thought keeps surfacing like a drowned thing bumping the underside of ice. It started in her heart, they're saying, a spark in the morning fire, the same fire everyone lights every morning, the same spark that flies up in your own house every single day and dies on the damp underside of your own thatch. Every day, hundreds of sparks. Every day the roof decides to let you live. You never thought about that before this morning. You will now think about it every morning for the rest of your life. That's how it works here, this thing we're circling tonight. Nobody hands you fear all at once. The world installs it in you one demonstration at a time. Dusk. The Angelus bell. 3 strokes. 3 strokes. 3 strokes. Then 9. Old Roger the sexton pulling the rope in the dark of the tower. And the whole village stops where it stands, in yards, in doorways, in the street, and mutters the words and crosses itself. And you do too, standing by the woodpile with the maul still in your hand. And I'll tell you something true about that bell. It is the one sound in this entire world that means nothing is wrong. It rings at the same hours every day. Fire or no fire, famine or no famine. The bell is the heartbeat. Later, soon, you will learn exactly how much that heartbeat holds people together when you hear what happens to a village when it stops. Supper is pottage. Supper is always pottage. Understand that word and you understand half of medieval life. A pot that hangs over the fire and never fully empties, barley and dried peas and whatever the garden gives, onions, kale, a scrap of bacon on a good week for the grease of it, simmered to a thick green-brown porridge that your mother ladles onto trenchers of yesterday's bread. Tonight it is thicker than usual, and there is definitely bacon in it, and nobody says why, but everyone knows why. Because this morning the village nearly burned, and food is how your mother says the thing she cannot say. You eat with your father, your mother, your sister Agnes, who is 13, and your grandmother, who sits nearest the fire because her blood has gone thin, all of you in the one room that is the whole house, in firelight, with the animals breathing and shifting behind the wicker partition at the byre end, filling the dark with a warm fug of vox and the sweetish smell of hay and dung. The fire crackles and spits. The wind fingers the thatch. Your father says the cock's fire came from a cracked hearthstone. He's seen it before, and that he'll check theirs. Ours. Tomorrow. And your mother says nothing and eats and watches the flames the way a shepherd watches a dog he does not trust. And then your grandmother, in the voice she keeps for such things, cracked and flat, says, "A fire's quick, any road. Quick's a mercy, not like the hunger years." And there it is. The room goes down a degree. Your mother's spoon stops. Your father looks at the table. Nobody tells the old woman to be quiet. You don't tell her anything. But the silence that follows is a lid pressed down on a pot, and inside that pot, you know, without being told, are the years 1315 and 1316 and 1317, and whatever your grandmother buried in them, and whatever your mother, who was 6 years old then, watched her bury. Some houses tell their wars. Yours holds them. Either way, the wars are at the table every night, sitting in the empty spaces, eating their share. You sleep, when you sleep, on a straw pallet against the wall, under a blanket of coarse wool and a sheepskin, with Agnes an arm's length away and your parents in the one bedstead, and your grandmother wrapped like a parcel by the banked fire. The straw rustles with every movement, yours and everyone else's, and there are mice in the thatch. There are always mice in the thatch, a dry secret scurrying overhead that you stopped hearing years ago. And the dark inside a medieval house at night is a dark you have likely never experienced. When the fire is banked under its curfew of ash and the rushlight is out, there is nothing. No glow under a door, no light leaking from anywhere on earth. You can hold your hand against your own eyes and see absolutely nothing, and in that nothing, hearing becomes the whole of you. And this is where you'd find them if you could walk unseen through this village at midnight. The wounds. In the dark, in the listening hours, Godfrey Miller, 3 doors down, who was pressed into the King's Array 8 years ago and marched to France, and came home after Crécy with all his limbs and something missing anyway, and who wakes the whole row some nights, shouting words no one understands, and whose wife has learned to wake him with a broom handle from across the room, because the one time she shook him by the shoulder, he broke her nose before his eyes were open. The village doesn't mock him. The village says the war is still in him, the way you'd say a splinter is still in a wound, and that is, when you think about it, a diagnosis of startling accuracy. Old Simon at the mill, who cannot pass a certain flooded ditch on the low road, has not passed it in 30 years, walks half a mile around it in all weathers, and everyone knows why, and no one says why, because in the famine winter that ditch is where they found his brother, your own mother, who kisses fallen bread. Marjorie Cock, who from tonight onward will smell smoke that isn't there, will smell it at Mass, at market, in June with every hearth cold, and will stand up wild-eyed in the middle of ordinary afternoons, and people will hold her arm and say gently, "There's no fire, Marjorie, sit down, there is no fire," because everyone here understands, without any theory at all, that a thing can keep happening to a person long after it has stopped happening in the world. That is the country you live in. Not a country of monsters. A country of ordinary people, densely packed with the aftermaths of things. All of them coping, none of them treated, all of them getting up the next morning anyway. Hold that. Because everything I've shown you so far, the famine in your mother, the war in Godfrey, the fire in Marjorie, all of that is the world's ordinary cruelty, the standing inventory of damage in any village in any decade of this century. What's coming up the roads this autumn is not ordinary. What's coming will make all of it look like the good old days. You first hear the word on the Wednesday you walk to the market town. It's a fortnight after the fire, deep in October now, and the Reeve has sent you and your father with the handcart 11 miles there to sell the last of the surplus barley and buy salt and iron. A ploughshare wants mending, and salt is life itself, because salt is how meat survives winter. You leave in the dark, frost on the grass like a fall of grey hair, your breath ghosting, the cart's one wheel creaking on its axle in a rhythm that will live in your ears for 2 days. The road is the road of your entire world, a rutted brown scar between hedges, mended with brushwood in its worst holes, and along it moves everything that ever moves. Drovers with bullocks, a friar with his hood up, pack horses in a swaying line, a manor cart, 2 beggars whose feet are wrapped in rags, and every single traveller is read and ranked and judged in the 3 seconds of passing, because on a medieval road every stranger is a question, and some questions have knives. The town, when you finally crest the last hill at mid-morning, is the largest thing you know. Perhaps 2,000 souls, a wall of stone around its heart, a church tower twice the height of your own, and rising over the gate as you approach, the smell, the famous town smell which arrives before the town does, wood smoke and horse dung and tanning pits and fish and humanity, a smell with layers and a history, a smell you can lean on. Inside the gate the street narrows and roars. Stalls crowd the pavement, awnings snapping, and the noise is a solid substance. Hawkers crying hot pies and good ale and ribbons, iron tyres grinding on cobbles, A pig screaming somewhere with terrible sincerity, bells marking the hour, and under it all the endless human churn of 2,000 voices bargaining at once. Your father sells the barley at a fair price after a haggle, conducted entirely in grunts and headshakes, with the dealer he has grunted at for 20 years. You buy the salt, coarse, grey, glittering, wrapped in sacking, heavy as sin, and take the cracked share to a smith whose forge breathes heat into the street like an open mouth of hell. And while the smith works, hammer-song ringing, flat and bright, ting-ting-tang, ting-ting-tang, you stand in that borrowed warmth and let the town wash over you, and that is when you hear it. Two merchants, wool men by their good cloaks, standing close together by the forge door, speaking low, the way men speak when they are handling something they don't want to drop. And you are not listening, except that you are always listening. Your ears were rebuilt years ago to catch exactly this register, the low urgent one, and out of the murmur come the words, Bristol, dying. And then one word you have never heard before, a word that will eat the world, pestilence. The taller merchant says it has come into Bristol on the ships, that men in Bristol were saying, men who had it from Gascony, from the sea, that it kills in 3 days, or 2, or 1, that it takes the strong the same as the weak, that in the lands over the sea, whole towns, and here his voice drops further and you lose it, and you find you have drifted 2 steps closer without deciding to, and the shorter merchant is shaking his head, not in disbelief, in refusal, and he says, loudly enough to hear because anger makes men loud, sailors' tales. Every year the sea brings a new terror, and every year it drowns before it lands. And the tall one says nothing for a moment, and then he says the sentence you will carry home 11 miles like a hot coal in a box. Bristol is 100 miles of road from here. It came 1,000 miles of sea to reach Bristol. Do you think 100 miles of road will stop it? Your father heard it too, you know, because on the walk home, with the mended share ringing faintly against the cart rail at each rut, and the salt riding like a sleeping child, he says almost nothing for 11 miles, and your father's silences have grades, and you know them all, and this is the deep one. Near the last hill before home, with your own church tower rising ahead of you out of the trees, small and grey and yours, he says, not really to you. There was talk like this before the Hunger Years, they say, signs and wonders and travellers' tales. Nobody believed that either. Then he spits carefully into the ditch, which is your father's way of ending a conversation with God, and says no more. That night you lie in the black and listen to the mice and do the thing that everyone in every century does with the dread too large to hold. You argue with it. It's far away. The sea kills sailors, everyone knows that. Ports are sinks of fever, everyone knows that. 100 miles is 100 miles, and each argument stands for a moment like a wall of green wood, and behind the walls, patient as water, sits the merchant's sentence. Do you think 100 miles of road will stop it? Winter comes, and here is the strange, cruel mercy of your world. Winter is so hard, so consuming, that it makes an excellent lid for dread. There is no time to fear a rumour when the present is trying to kill you in person. The cold this year comes early and stays like a bailiff. You wake each morning in air you can see, breath frost furring the underside of the blanket where your breathing touched it all night. The water in the crock by the door freezes. You break it with the heel of your hand, a sound like a small bone snapping, and wash your face in melt so cold it feels like being slapped with light. Your thumb split opens on schedule and weeps and stings all day inside its wrap of tallowed rag. The work is threshing now, weeks of threshing. You and your father in the barn, from grey light to grey light, swinging flails, 2 sticks joined by an eelskin thong, the swipple whistling over your shoulder and cracking down on the spread sheaves. Whump, 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 a 2-man rhythm you keep without thought, offset like heartbeats, because 2 flails landing together is a broken rhythm, and a broken rhythm is how a man takes a swipple across the skull. The dust hangs in the barn in golden constellations. It packs your nose, grits your teeth, itches in the creases of your neck. By night your shoulders are stone and your hands will not fully open, and you sit at supper holding your spoon like a shovel, and your mother, without a word, rubs grease into your knuckles as if you were a piece of harness, which, in the manners ledgers you more or less are. Christmas comes, and it is real, and I want you to have it before what's ahead, because this is also true of their world. 12 days when work stops dead. The church glowing with every candle the wax could make. Green boughs over doorways in defiance of the dead season. The Lord's obligatory feast in the manor barn. Obligatory in the deepest sense he owes it. Custom is law. Where you eat meat until your stomach is astonished. Real meat. And the ale goes round and round. And Godfrey Miller, 3 cups in, sings in a huge cracked voice. And is happy, actually happy. You can see the war leave him for one evening. And there is dancing. A great stamping ring of the whole village with the frost smoking off the thatch. And in the ring Alice Webster's hand finds yours again. And this time it stays for 3 dances. And her face in the torchlight is flushed and laughing and turned toward you. And afterward, in the cold by the barn door in front of God and several extremely interested old women, she stands close enough that your breath and hers make one cloud, and she says, "My father will want to talk to yours before Lent, I should think," which is, in the language of this world, an entire love letter, a proposal and a promise, all in 11 words. You walk home that night through the frozen ruts with your blood ringing like the smith's anvil, 19 years old, warm in a freezing world, and for whole hours together you do not think about Bristol at all. The pestilence has all the time in the world. It moved up the roads all winter while England ate its Christmas meat. By the spring of 1349 it is not a rumour from the coast any more. It is in the next parish. The way you learn it is the way you learn everything. Bells. It's a raw morning in March, and you are harrowing the spring field behind a borrowed horse, breaking the ploughed clod small for the barley seed, when the wind shifts into the east and brings you the sound of St. Edith's, the church of the parish beyond the beck, 4 miles off. You know that bell the way you know a neighbour's voice. And it is tolling, not ringing, tolling, the slow single stroke, the death bell, one blow, a long silence in which the sound goes on living in the air, another blow. The passing bell tells the parish someone is dying. The death knell counts them out, strokes for a man, strokes for a woman, then a stroke for each year of the life. Every soul within earshot stops and counts. It's how news travels before news travels. You stop and count. The knell runs long, a man of 60-some, and you think, an old one, well, March takes the old, March always takes the old, and you cluck to the horse and go on. The bell tolls again before you reach the headland. You stop. You count. A short count this time, a young count. It tolls again within the hour, and again past noon, and by the time the light is failing, you're standing in the middle of the harrowed field with the horse's rein slack in your fist, facing east, doing nothing but listening, and so you can see them, small dark figures on the strips all across your own parish. Is everyone else? Nobody is working. Everyone is standing in the wet March fields, faces turned east like a field of dark sunflowers, counting the dead of a village 4 miles away on the wind. 5 knells in one day. Nobody has ever heard 5 knells in one day. And underneath the counting, in every skull on every strip, the same wordless arithmetic. 4 miles, the beck between us, 4 miles. Now watch what fear does to a place, because it starts that same evening, and it is one of the most human things you will ever see. First comes the closing. The village, which has always leaked and flowed, peddlers, friars, beggars, kin, visiting kin, seals itself like a fist. The reeve and the churchwardens and every senior man stand in the church porch after Mass on Sunday, and it is agreed, in the heavy, slow way village law is agreed, that no stranger comes past the cross at the lane's end. Food will be left on the flat stone there for travellers, bread and cheese set out like offerings to something dangerous, but no one crosses in. 2 men watch the lane by day. It feels mad and it feels necessary, and it is, in fact, the single most medically sound decision available to anyone in Europe in 1349, arrived at by peasants, by instinct, generations before anyone can explain why it works. Then comes the praying, and I mean praying of a density you cannot imagine. The church fills every evening now, not just Sunday. The priest, Father John, a local man, a farmer's son with dirt-coloured hands who says the Latin honestly and keeps his own pig, leads litanies until his voice frays. There's a procession around the bounds of the parish, the whole village walking behind the cross in the rain, barefoot, some of them, through the actual mud, singing the penitential psalms, begging the sky. Candles burn before St. Sebastian, the plague saint, the one shown stuck full of arrows, because that is exactly how this thing is understood. Arrows out of heaven, invisible, already in flight, and prayer as the only shield. Do not stand outside this and find it quaint. These people are doing, with total commitment, the only thing their entire model of the universe says can help. It is not stupidity. It is the bravest available act. And then comes the third thing, the quietest, and the one that tells you most. People begin setting their affairs straight. Debts are suddenly paid, small old debts. A bushel owed for 3 years appearing on a doorstep at dawn. Quarrels are ended. 2 brothers who have not spoken since a boundary dispute in your childhood are seen talking at the well, stiff as posts, but talking. Confession lines stretch out the church door. The whole village is doing what a man does when he hears riders on his own road at last, standing up, brushing himself down, and turning to face the lane. Alice's father talks to your father in your yard in April, both of them formal as bishops, and it is settled. After harvest the banns will be called. After harvest. Everything in your world is after harvest. Harvest is the hinge of the year. You hold that phrase all through the spring like a coin sewn into a hem. Whatever comes after harvest, Alice. You catch her eye at Mass across the aisle, men one side, women the other, and there passes between you a look that says exactly that, coin and hem and all. And the pestilence crosses the beck in May. It comes, as far as anyone will ever be able to work out, not by a stranger, the watched lane holds, but by wool, a pack of fleeces, bought and carried and stored from a farm on the other side, or by the miller's second son, who slipped out to see a girl in the stricken parish because he was 17 and immortal, or by neither, by rat and flea, which is the truth. moving along hedgerows and grain sacks, entirely indifferent to your quarantine of the lane. Though no soul on earth will know that for another 540 years, it doesn't matter how. What matters is a Tuesday in late May, the year's most beautiful weather, hawthorn blossom lying on the hedges like snowfall and the cuckoo calling, when word runs up the street the way fire runs up thatch. The smith's wife is taken sick. Emma at the forge, a swelling in the armpit, they're saying, the size of an egg, they're saying, black, they're saying, and the village, which has been braced for 8 weeks, discovers that bracing does nothing at all. I have to take you into that house, because you go into it, and this is where the story stops being about fear of a thing and becomes the thing. You go because your mother sends you on the Thursday with a pot of broth. Understand that too. Even now, at the door of the fire itself, the village code holds. The sick are fed. Neighbours are not abandoned. Your mother, who kisses fallen bread, who knows exactly what catastrophe is, ladles broth into a crock, wraps it in cloth against the heat, and puts it in your hands. And her hands, as she does it, are perfectly steady, and that steadiness is the most frightening thing you have seen yet. Leave it within the door, she says. Don't stop, don't breathe deep, come straight home. Her whole medical understanding is in those instructions. Bad air, corrupted vapours, miasma, the best theory of the age, and it is wrong in every particular and correct in its every practical effect, and it may be why you live. The smith's house stands with its door open to the beautiful day. You smell it from the street. Every house has a smell and you know them all, and this is none of them. This is sweetish and heavy and wrong, a smell your body identifies before your mind does, so that your feet slow on their own and the hair stands up along your arms in the sunlight. Inside, in the dimness, you can hear breathing, loud, labouring, a wet dragging rasp like a saw in green wood, with a catch and a moan on the turn of it, and under the breathing, the smith's voice, that huge chest that fills the forge with bellowed hammer talk, reduced to a low, ruined murmuring, saying her name, just her name, over and over, the way you'd blow on an ember. You set the crock inside the doorway. You've been told not to look, and you look because you are human. On the bed in the corner, Emma. 3 days ago she stood in the street in this same body laughing at something with your mother. Now the body's a battlefield. Her face is the colour of tallow gone bad, grey-yellow, running wet. Her lips have gone a shade of violet blue you've never seen on a living person, and her neck. She turns, restless, burning, and you see it. The side of her neck bulges as if a plum had been forced under the skin, the flesh over it stretched taut and shining, purple-black at the crown, and you understand with a lurch that the swellings are real. The stories were not stories. The thing has a shape, and the shape is in this room. Around the bed, laid out with desperate neatness, the tools of every remedy the world can offer. A bowl of vinegar, bruised rue and wormwood scattered on the floor to sweeten the air, a written charm from the priest folded under her pillow, and her rosary wound so tight around her wrist that the beads bite the flesh. Emma turns her head and looks at you. You will spend the rest of your life wishing she hadn't. Her eyes are enormous, fever-glassed, and perfectly aware. That is the horror. She is in there, entire, behind the ruin, and she looks at you standing in her doorway in the smell of her own death, holding a crock of your mother's broth, and she cannot speak, and what her eyes do instead is apologise for being seen like this. A woman drowning on dry land in her own bed, and the last message she has strength to send across a room is embarrassment. You are outside again without any memory of turning. You're halfway up the street. The hawthorn is still ridiculous with blossom. The cuckoo is still calling 2 notes, bland as an idiot. The sun lies on everything like honey. You stop at the churchyard wall and grip the top of it, cold, rough stone biting your blistered palm, and you are sick. Quietly and thoroughly into the nettles, and then you stand there shaking with the stone gripped hard, because the stone is the only thing in the world that feels like it is telling the truth. Emma dies on the Saturday. The great bell tolls her out, strokes for a woman, then 31 strokes for the years, and the whole village stands still and counts, exactly as it counted the deaths 4 miles off in March. It is the last death this village will ever count properly, because by the time Emma is in the ground, the smith is sick, and both their children and the family at the house adjoining, and a boy who helped at the forge, and within a fortnight the tolling has become so constant that old Roger the sexton, 70 years old, hauling on the rope for hours a day, weeping as he pulls, is forbidden by Father John to ring the knells at all any more. The priest standing in the nave and making the hardest pastoral ruling of his life, that the bell which has counted every soul out of this parish for 200 years must fall silent, because the sound is killing the living, and so the heartbeat stops, and the village learns what silence is. I want to slow down here, because this is the heart of tonight, and I am not going to get through it by listing horrors at you. Horror in a list is just weather. What matters, what the whole question of this episode hangs on, is what these weeks do to the inside of a person. So we are going to live them the way you live them, which is one task at a time, with your hands, because your hands are what you have. June. The village has perhaps 240 souls when the month begins. The work of the sick comes first, and it falls, as such work always falls, mostly on the women, and it is savage. Your mother and 3 other wives become, by nothing but default, the village's nurses. They go from house to house with broth and vinegar water and clean rags, doing the only things that can be done, cooling the burning, holding the cup, turning the body, saying the psalm. Some houses they are welcomed into, some houses will not open, fear seals some doors from the inside now. Whole families walling themselves in with their sick, and you hear things through those walls passing in the street that you will hear again for years in the dark. And some houses have swung the other way entirely. At the Aldiths, where 3 lie sick, the door stands wide day and night, propped with a stone, because Mother Aldith has declared that death is coming in anyway, and she'll not have him find the house shamed and shut like a debtor's. Your work is the ground. It begins in the 2nd week, when Father John comes to your father in the yard at dusk. The priest has changed in 14 days the way bread changes in a wet week. His face has fallen in on its bones, and his voice, that Sunday instrument, has gone small and careful, a man carrying a full bowl. He says the sexton cannot do it alone. He says it plainly, standing in the yard, smell of dung and wood smoke. The graves. There are too many graves. He needs young backs, and he will not order anyone he's asking, and God sees who answers. Your father looks at you, not deciding for you. That look is a question. The first time in your life he has put a man's question to you and stood waiting on the answer. And you hear your own voice say, "I'll dig." And it sounds like someone else's voice, someone calmer, and your father nods once, and that nod is the largest thing he has ever given you. So this is your June. You learn the churchyard the way you know the long furlong. You learn that the sexton's spade is heavier than a field spade, iron-shod ash, and that grave clay 2 feet down is a different creature from plough soil. Cold, blue-grey, dense as cheese, peeling off the blade in slabs that land with a fat dead slap. You learn the geometry of it, 6 feet by 2, and you stop going a man's full depth by the 3rd week because there is no time. The priest absolves the shallowness. God knows the arithmetic. You learn to dig in the early morning and the late evening because the noon sun on that work is not survivable, and you learn what the work does to a body. The specific pain that lives between the shoulder blades by the 4th grave of a day, the way your hands crack in new places, along the base of every finger, cracks that pack with churchyard clay, and sting at supper when the salt of the pottage finds them. You learn that you can do it. That is one of the things a catastrophe teaches, and it is not a gift exactly, but it is not nothing. You learn the true size of what you can carry, and it is enormous, and you will never again be able to unknow it. And you learn the other things, the ones that go in deep and stay. You learn what a village sounds like with its bell stopped. The knell is forbidden, so death goes silent, and the silence is worse than any tolling, because now every death arrives as a figure in a doorway, someone standing suddenly at the churchyard wall while you dig, not calling out, just standing, waiting until you look up. And the standing itself is the whole message. You begin to flinch at figures in doorways. You will flinch at figures in doorways when you are 50. You learn what it is to bury the ones you know in order. This is a village of 240. There is no such thing as a stranger's grave. You dig for Emma's children, both in 1 week, and the grave, the little one, takes almost no time at all, and the smallness of the digging is the thing that undoes you. You have to stop and stand with your forehead against the spade handle for a while. You dig for old Roger the sexton himself in the 4th week, beside the tower whose rope he pulled for 50 years, and Father John says over him that Roger rang every soul of this parish to heaven within living memory, and now goes to hear the bells rung better. You dig at the end of June, on the worst morning of your life to that point for Hob, the ox boy. 11 years old, the singer, taken between a Monday and a Thursday, and you stand at the graveside while his mother makes a sound you did not know people could make, a sound with no language in it at all, and the oxen are audible from the pasture over the wall, lowing, missing him, missing the voice, actually missing him. And something in you moves sideways in that moment and does not move back. It's hard to name. Call it the moment the death stop being events and become the medium. Weather. The thing everything else happens inside of. Because here is what the chronicles of this year keep saying. Monks all across Europe writing it in different words with the same shaking hand. The living scarcely suffice to bury the dead. And behind that sentence, which sounds like logistics, is what you are living, which is not logistics. It is standing in a half-dug grave at sunset, 20 years old next Lammas, hip deep in cold clay, arms trembling, watching swifts hunt insects in a gold sky, above a village where 1/3 of the doors will never open again, and realizing you have not wept for anyone in 11 days, not because you are strong, but because something in you has been overrun. Some inner sexton has stopped ringing, and the deaths are going by uncounted inside you, exactly as they go by uncounted in the tower. The old people have a word for what you're becoming. Mazed. It means dazed, stunned, lost in the maze. You are all mazed now. You work, you eat what's put before you, you answer when spoken to, and it's all happening a little way off on the far side of a pain of something. And the pain, you understand dimly, is not weakness. The pain is your soul doing triage. Feeling is expensive, and there is a famine of it, and everything is being rationed toward one end only. Keep digging, keep ploughing, keep alive. And still, hold on to this too, because it is just as true. The village does not stop being a village. This is the thing the horror stories never tell you and the parish records prove. The hay is cut in late June, because the beasts must eat next winter whoever is dead, and the whole remaining strength of the place goes out to the meadow together. The mowers advancing in their old slanted line, scythes hissing, and for whole hours the work is so utterly itself. The swing, the wet green smell, the rasp of the whetstone, the ache, that it holds everyone like a hand. Marjorie Cock, whose burned hands healed crooked, rakes with the women and keeps an eye on 4 children who are not hers, because their mothers are nursing or dead, and no one asked her to, and no one needed to. Father John says Mass every single morning to a church 1/3 empty, and never once, not once, fails to appear at a deathbed when sent for, walking into the poisoned air of house after house, with his oil and his host, and whatever you come to believe in your long life about God, you will never in that life hear a word against priests without seeing John's face in the doorway of a dying house, grey with exhaustion, and going in anyway. Some flee. 2 families, packing carts in the dark, gone north to kin, and nobody curses them, or everybody does. Quietly, and both responses are correct. One man, oldest's cousin, goes the other way and drinks himself into a shouting ruin, stands in the street at midnight demanding the sky explain itself, and is put to bed by neighbours, again and again, with a patience that is its own kind of prayer. And in the 3rd week, a strange fever of spending. Rings and heirloom spoons given away, hoarded coin suddenly loose because what is saving for? You see a man give his best cow to a widow. The pain you live behind notes all of it, files all of it. People, you are learning, do not become anything simple under the hammer. They become more of everything at once. Alice does not sicken. You track her the way sailors track a star, a glimpse at the well, her figure in the haymaking line, her voice in the responses at Mass, alive, alive, alive. And you two have stopped speaking almost entirely by unspoken treaty, because you are in the graves every day and she has her mother's house to keep, her mother being among the nurses, and there is a superstition growing in you that you dare not stand close to her, as if what your hands touch daily could pass through you to her like damp through a wall. But at the end of June, on the evening of the day you buried Hob, she's waiting at the corner of the churchyard wall when you come out, standing in the long gold light with her shawl crossed and bound at her waist, and she doesn't say anything about anything. She holds out a piece of bread with honey on it from her father's one hive, and you take it and eat it standing there, and it is so sweet after the clay and the day that your eyes sting, and she watches you eat it the whole time, fierce, as if eating were a thing you could be held to. And then she says, after harvest, just that, the whole promise renewed in 2 words, thrown across the plague like a rope across a river, and walks home. And you stand there in the churchyard gateway with honey on your fingers and the dead at your back, and discover that you are in the teeth of everything, not done hoping. It feels almost like a defect. It is the reason your species survives. July comes in hot and blue, and in the 2nd week of July, your grandmother wakes complaining of a headache, and by evening she is burning, and there is a tenderness under her arm that she will not let anyone see. and now it is your house. Now it is your door standing open to the beautiful day. Your grandmother dies well, if the phrase can hold any weight, and in her world it holds enormous weight. She is old. She has been ready, in the way of medieval old women, for a decade. Her rosary is worn to pebbles with readiness. She burns for 2 days, lucid for stretches, and in one of the lucid stretches she orders the household about her bed like a woman ordering a kitchen. The priest fetched, the candle lit and set in her hands, her few things spoken for aloud, the good shawl to Agnes, the little knife with the antler handle to you, her place by the fire to whoever is coldest. Father John comes and does the great offices, the oil on her eyes and ears and lips and hands, the old words, and your grandmother, who buried a husband and 4 of her 7 children in her time, and carried the famine inside her for 30 years, without ever once describing it, makes her confession and receives her God, and then lies quietly working through her beads, and near dawn on the 3rd day, between one breath and a breath that doesn't come, she leaves. Your mother closes her eyes. The room smells of tallow and sickness and the July hay smell coming in at the window. And there is, along with everything else in that room, and you feel almost criminal noticing it, a strange stillness that is not entirely grief. It is completion. This is what their whole civilization means by a good death. Not a painless one, there is no such thing here, but a death with time in it, time to set the soul in order, and you understand at her graveside, which you dug yourself, cleanly, full depth, taking your time, a grandson's time, that half the terror of the pestilence was never the dying, it was the speed. It steals the dying's one consolation, which is the chance to do it properly. Agnes sickens the day after the funeral. And this is the one I can't walk you through the middle of. I'll tell you the shape of it, and we'll let the details stay in that house, where they belong. She is 13. It is fast. The terrible mercy and the terrible cruelty in 3 days from the headache to the end. And it is not quiet, and your mother does not leave the bedside for any of it, and your father, who you have seen lift a cart out of a ditch, stands in the yard through the 2nd night splitting wood that does not need splitting, hour after hour in the dark, the maul strokes landing steady as a bell that isn't allowed to ring, and you sit against the outside wall of your own house beneath the window because you cannot be in the room and cannot leave the wall, with your knees drawn up and your back against the daub, feeling the cold come up out of the ground through your seat and not moving, listening to your little sister fight, and somewhere in the smallest hours her fighting goes soft, and then the only sound in the world is your mother's voice, very low, saying the prayers alone, and the maul in the yard stopping. You dig on the 3rd morning. Father John tries to send you home. There are other men now, the grave crew has grown. Catastrophe recruits, and you look at him and he looks at you, and he is a farmer's son and he understands and he lets you dig. It is the only thing you have. The spade, the clay, the slap of the slabs, the burn between the shoulders, the work taking the weight the way the yoke takes the plough's weight, hour by hour, because your hands know how to do this, and nothing else in you knows how to do anything. Agnes is buried beside your grandmother on a white-skied morning with swift screaming round the tower, and the household that walks home afterward is 3, where it was 5 a fortnight since. And the house. This is the thing no one warns you of. The house itself has changed size. It is enormous now. 2 people's silence takes up more room than 5 people's noise ever did. Your mother sets 4 places at supper that evening, sees it, stands looking at the 4th trencher for a long moment, and puts it away without a word, and the click of the wood on the shelf is the loudest sound of the year, and the plague, having been in your house, moves on down the street because it was never about your house. Through the rest of July it burns along the far row, takes the reeve, the manor's whole memory, 40 years of who holds what and who owes what dying with him in a single night. Takes Godfrey Miller, the crazy man, who nursed his neighbours with a strange perfect calm through the worst weeks, as if he'd been to the end of the world once already, and knew the paths, and takes, in the last days of the month, Father John. The priest dies as he lived, in someone else's house, taken sick at a deathbed and carried home, and here the village meets a horror that outranks for them everything you have seen so far, and you must lean into their minds to feel it. He dies, and there is no priest to shrive him, and then there is no priest at all. No mass, no confession, no last oil for the dying, and the dying continue. In your world, this is not an inconvenience of staffing. The sacraments are the bridge over the pit, the entire technology of eternity, and the bridge keeper is dead, and every soul in the village now faces the thing that has been killing their bodies with the added terror that it may reach their souls. The bishop, God be thanked, has foreseen this. Bishops all over England are issuing the same emergency ruling this summer, and it is one of the most quietly extraordinary documents of the age. Word comes from the archdeaconry that in the absence of a priest, the dying may confess to a layman, to anyone, to each other, and so it happens, in August, in your village, the thing your grandmother would not have believed the sky could permit, ploughmen hearing ploughmen's confessions. Your own father, kneeling at the bedside of his neighbour Aldith's cousin, the shouting drinker, holding his hand and receiving, awkwardly, gently, terribly, the whispered inventory of a whole life's sins because there was no one else, and the church herself had said love may do this now. If you take one image from this whole night, take that one. August. The barley stands ripe in the strips, and the dying thins and thins. 5 in a week, then 2, then 1. The fire, having eaten what it could reach, starving at last. And the village walks out of its houses into the amazing ordinary sunlight, and looks around itself and begins to count. This time, the living. Something between 80 and 90 are gone, out of 240, in 11 weeks. Say it as a fraction, and it says nothing. Walk it as a street, and it never stops saying it. Every third door. The forge cold, its anvil already wearing a lace of orange rust. Whole tofts standing with nettles coming up through the yards in a single season, fast as rumour, and the doors of the empty houses left open or shut according to how the end came, and children. This is the detail that stops you in the street. Children rehomed everywhere, sorted among kin and neighbours in a vast unspoken redistribution, so that half the households in the village now contain a quiet extra child at the table who flinches when spoken to suddenly, and is fed and is kept without paperwork, without ceremony, forever. And the harvest is standing, and there are not enough hands. So the harvest of 1349 is the strangest and hardest of your life. All the living in the fields together dawn to dark, women reaping alongside men, old men binding, the extra children stooking, Marjorie Cock with her crooked hands leading the gleaners, and the strips of the dead are cut too by common decision, cut and carried and accounted to their heirs if heirs live, and to the parish if not, because grain does not care whose it is, and winter is winter. You reap until your hand moulds to the sickle's crook, and will not open flat at night. Alice binds behind you, sheaf after sheaf, straightening with each one against the ache the way all binders do, and you work within sight of each other all through those amber weeks, not talking much, being alive in the same field, which is its own entire language. The weather, in the way of this monstrous year, is perfect. The barn fills. It should not have been possible, and it is done. And on the last evening, with the last cart creaking home under a moon like a shield boss and the whole surviving village walking behind it in the dust, somebody, you never learn who, begins, roughly, hoarsely, the harvest song, the same one sung behind the last cart every August since before memory, and it is taken up, voice by voice, cracked and thin and defiant, 80 dead and the song anyway, and you walk in the dust and the moonlight with your ruined hands and sing, and beside you your father is singing, and you have never once in your life heard your father sing. The banns are called in September by the new priest, a young man sent by the bishop, nervous, kind, ordained in a hurry like half the priests in England now, called 3 Sundays running over a congregation with holes in it, like a moth-eaten cloak, and no one objects, and in the first week of October in the church porch, as the custom is, in your father's good tunic with your mother's ring, you marry Alice Webster. The village comes, all of it. There is ale, and there are cakes, and there is dancing on the green in the cold gold afternoon, and the fiddle is played by a man who buried 2 sons in June, and he plays for 3 hours and will not stop, and watching his face as he plays, you understand something final about this year, that the feast is not in spite of the graves. The feast is aimed at them. Every wedding this autumn, and there are weddings all over England this autumn, a great wave of them, the parish registers show it, the survivors marrying in their scores. Every one of them is the living standing up in the wreckage and answering. That night, in the small house at the end of the Webster Toft that is yours now, yours and hers, with the fire banked and the October wind working the thatch, Alice sleeps with her back against your chest and her feet, which are freezing, pressed against your shins in a manner you will apparently now endure for life, and you lie awake in the black with your arm over her and her heart going steadily under your hand, and you think, it is over. We came through. It is over. And now at last we've arrived at the true subject of tonight, because it is not over. Nothing of the kind. The dying is over. What the dying leaves behind is just beginning, and it lives in the survivors, and it lives for decades, and it is the answer to the question in this episode's title. It starts, for you, with the door. Some weeks after the wedding, deep in November, you are menders harness by the fire, waxed thread, all, the leather cold and stiff and fight in your fingers, the good small work of winter evenings, when Alice comes in from the byre and the door, caught by the wind, bangs back against the frame, a flat hard crack, and you are on your feet, not startled the way anyone startles, on your feet with the all held like a knife and your heart going like a drum rolled downhill, and the room gone strange and bright and far away, and Alice standing in the doorway looking at you, and you looking at her, and the wind and the fire and a nothing else in the world happening at all. It was the door, she says. I know, you say. You do know. Knowing does nothing. You sit back down. Your hands won't manage the awl for a while, so you hold them still in your lap and wait for your own blood to believe you. And Alice, who is 17 and wiser than the bishop, doesn't say anything else. Just goes about the room being ordinary near you, on purpose, until the drum slows. That's the first one you notice. After that, you can't stop noticing in yourself. And then, this is the true revelation, in everyone. Your body has kept a ledger of the year, and it audits without warning. The smell of tallow burnt at a certain stage catches the back of your throat and puts you, for one lurching heartbeat, in the doorway of the smith's house. You have to leave the room while candles are snuffed, and you invent errands to make the leaving look like anything else. Church is treacherous ground. The bell is rung again now. The new priest restored it at Christmas, and the first time you heard the knell toll after its half-year silence. An old man of the far row, a natural death, a good death. Your legs took you out of your own yard and halfway up the croft before you understood you were moving. Sweat in a cold wind. A figure standing at a wall, waiting to be noticed, can still stop your breath in the street. And the sleep. Alice learns your nights within a month of marriage, which sounds you make, which of them to wake you from, and how. From across the mattress, with a hand on your ankle and her voice saying your name, plain and steady, wet, wet, it's the house. We're in the house. Because she learned that lesson from the whole village, which learned it from Godfrey Miller's wife. Never a hand on the shoulder of a sleeping man who has been where he has been. Now widen your eyes and look around, because you are the opposite of alone. This is the part that changes the whole meaning of the question we asked at the start. You are living in a village of the mazed. It is the winter of 1349 going into 1350, and everyone is carrying the year in their body, and you begin to see the carrying everywhere once you know its shapes. Your mother now keeps food in the house at a level that has no argument behind it. Not famine prudence. This is new. This is more. 2 crocks of meal where one always stood. Cheese hoarded past its best. She counts the loaves at night. You have seen her, moving the rushlight along the shelf, lips moving, and she was not praying. Your father has gone silent in a new register. He was always a quiet man, but this is not that. This has a direction. He works at 60 like a man being chased. Takes on the strips of a dead neighbour when the manor offers them, clears ditches no one asked him to clear. And one evening at your mother's table he sets down his spoon in the middle of supper and simply leaves out into the dark yard and stands there, and your mother catches your eye and gives the smallest shake of her head. Leave him. He comes back in after a while with wood nobody needs, and the meal goes on. Nobody speaks of it. There is nothing to speak of. There is only a man who heard his neighbour's whole life whispered into his ear on a deathbed, and buried a daughter, and has nowhere in the entire architecture of his world to put any of it down. Marjorie Cock smells smoke that isn't there, exactly as I told you she would, and the village handles her exactly as I told you it would, a hand on the arm. No fire, Marjorie. And she sits back down and is not shamed. Because who here is in any position to shame her? The children, the redistributed children, the extra ones at half the tables of the village, are their own quiet catalogue. The boy at the Aldiths who eats with one arm curled around his bowl like a dog that has been robbed. The girl at the miller's who follows her foster mother from room to room yard, yard to well, at a fixed distance of 5 feet, all day for a year. And in the alehouse, the widow Tanner's front room, where the men gather now the dark comes early, you notice that the talk has developed a hole in it. The year is discussed constantly and never touched. Men will talk prices, talk the vacant land, talk the astonishing wages being offered 2 manors over, talk anything that orbits the thing. and the thing itself sits in the middle of the room like a stone in a field that every ploughman knows the exact location of and no share ever strikes. Once one man, young, newer to the village, careless, starts to describe something he saw in June, in detail, and it is like watching a room flinch as one body. And old Simon of the mill, three-toed Simon, famine Simon, says, not unkindly into his ale, "We were all there, lad." And that is the end of it. We were all there. 4 words that are simultaneously a comfort, a communion, and a lid. So here is the question this whole episode has been walking toward, and it is a real question, and historians genuinely argue about it. If nearly everyone in a society has been through events like these, if the survivor of horrors is not the exception but the norm, what does that society become? Did medieval people have what we would call post-traumatic stress? You have spent tonight inside the evidence. You have felt the startle at hoofbeats, the smell that time travels, the nights that need managing, the mother who strikes at a dropped loaf on behalf of a year gone 30 years, the soldier who cannot be touched in his sleep, the man who cannot pass a ditch. None of that is invented for effect. Every one of those shapes walks straight out of the records and the chronicles and the court rolls, out of a world that had no diagnosis and endless case studies. Their bodies were our bodies. A nervous system in 1349 is the same instrument as a nervous system now, and it responds to overwhelming horror the same way, because it only has the one way. But, and hold this in the other hand, because it is just as true, and it is the deep and strangely comforting part. They did not go through it as we would. They went through it inside 3 great shelters we mostly no longer have, and you have been living in all 3 all night without my naming them. The first was meaning. When the worst happened, their world did not become senseless. That is a modern affliction. It became, if anything, more charged with sense. The pestilence was terrible, but it was not random. It was legible. It fit the largest story they knew, a story with justice and mercy and an ending in it, and a sufferer inside a story, even a fearsome story, suffers differently from a sufferer inside a void. The second was ritual. For every unbearable thing, their culture handed them something to do. Kneel here, walk the bounds, light this, say these words at this hour, keen at the grave, feast at the month's mind, wear this, and then, when the time comes, stop wearing it. Grief was not a private wilderness each person got lost in alone. It was a road with stations, walked in company, and ritual is what a body does with pain when the mind cannot hold it. And the third, the one you have felt on every page of this village's year, was each other. Nobody's catastrophe was solitary. The whole parish stood in the same fire. The widow was rebuilt a roof. The orphans were absorbed. The confession was heard at the end by a neighbour's own mouth. We were all there, lad. Modern trauma is so often trauma plus isolation, the wound and then the exile. Theirs was wound upon wound, but almost never exile. So did medieval people probably have PTSD, by the body's measure, the startle, the dreams, the ambushes of smell and sound, the vigilance that never stands down. Yes, beyond much doubt. The 14th century was a machine for producing it, and produced it at a scale we can barely think about. Not a generation with some traumatized people in it, but something closer to a traumatized generation, continent-wide. And yet they were not a broken civilization. That is the astonishment. Held up by story, ritual, and one another, the mazed got up every single morning and ploughed and married and sang behind the harvest cart and their children's children built the world that eventually built yours. Damage and endurance, both total, both true, in the same people at the same time. You, what, will never hear a word of any of this. You have no theory of yourself. What you have is what your grandmother had, and her grandmother the next furrow. So take the next furrow. Take the years, because the years after the great dying are their own strange country, and you're going to live in them, and they are not what you'd guess. The world does not sit in ashes. The world, with a third of its people gone, tilts, and for the people at the bottom of it, the people like you, it tilts unbelievably upward. It begins with the land. There is suddenly land everywhere. The tofts of the dead, the strips of the dead, holding standing empty with their rents unpaid and their hearths cold. And the lord of the manor, who a year ago could look out at a crowd of land-hungry peasants and name his terms, now looks out at empty furlongs and a short row of survivors, and the survivors look back, and everyone present can do the arithmetic. In the spring of 1350, the steward comes to you, walks to your yard, a thing that has never happened in the history of your family, and offers you the late Reeves holding, 12 acres of the best drained land in the parish, at a rent your father would have crawled to Coventry on his knees for. And you take it, trying to keep your face slow and grave like a man weighing matters, while inside you a boy is shouting. And it is happening everywhere, all over England, this same conversation in 10,000 yards. Rents falling, entry fines forgiven, hated old services quietly commuted to money, because a lord's land is worth nothing without backs, and backs, for the first time in anyone's memory, can bargain. And wages. The word runs through the alehouses of England like fire through August stubble. Over at the Abbey's manors they are paying harvest men double, and dinner and ale with it. Labourers, landless men, the poorest men alive, discover that they can walk off a bad master's field at noon and be hired by a desperate better one before supper. The great and the good are appalled. The king is appalled. Within a year of the pestilence, Parliament panics and passes laws. The Ordinance of Labourers, then the Statute, commanding in solemn ink that wages be frozen at the old rates, that men take the work offered them at the prices of the time before, as if the time before could be legislated back into existence, as if you could ordain the dead back into the fields. You hear the statute read out at the manor court, the steward's voice going carefully through the clauses, and you stand in the court with the other tenants, all of you with your caps in your hands and your faces perfectly respectful, and the reading finishes, and everyone goes home, and everyone goes on paying and charging exactly what the empty world says things are worth, quietly, stubbornly everywhere, forever. It is one of the great silent mutinies of history, conducted entirely by people who would tell you sincerely that they honour the king. The old world is ordering the tide, you are the tide, none of which unhaunts a single house. Hold both truths, because the village holds both. These are the strangest years, fuller bellies and emptier benches, meat in the pot more weeks than not, actual meat. Your children will grow up thinking meat is normal, and you will watch them think it with a feeling you cannot name. And the faro still standing 1/3 dark at dusk, the nettled yards, the forge that stayed cold 2 full years until a new smith, a young one from Warwick Way, finally took it over, and the first hammer ring across the morning stopped half the street mid-stride, every head turning toward a sound that was the past itself, alive again, and nobody could have told you whether the feeling that went through the village in that moment was gladness or grief. And the honest answer is that it was both, riding the same bell note. Your own house fills. A daughter first, in the last days of 1350, you name her Agnes. And when you say the name to Alice, it is the only time in your marriage you will ever see her hesitate. One heartbeat, and then she says, Agnes. Good. And it is done. And your mother, when she hears it, turns and is busy with the fire for a while. Then a son, John, for the priest. Then another son, dead in a week in the way of this world, buried in a christening cloth, a grief that is enormous. And also, and this is the terrible fluency you now have, a grief with a road through it. Because you know how to do this now, you and Alice both. You know the stations, and you walk them together and come out the far side, still holding hands. Then another daughter. The pallets multiply along the wall. The nights fill up with small breathing. And you notice, years in, you notice, that the mice in the thatch have become again what they were when you were a child, just mice. That the dark some nights is just the dark. Not all nights, never all nights. The ledger keeps its pages. Hoofbeats on the road will lift the hair on your arms when you're 60. That circuit was built in you at 19, and it does not decommission, it only quiets. But here is what the years teach you, and it is the closest thing to mercy in this whole story. The ambush is thin. The body's audits come further apart, and the village, without any doctrine, without a single trained soul, works on its wounded the only medicine it has, which is inclusion. Work in company, grief in company, feast days that drag even the darkest houses to the green, the endless practical entanglement of a place where no one can so much as harvest alone, and the medicine is partial and crude and real. Godfrey Miller never came fully home from France in the 14 years he lived after it, but he lived them inside a village, ate at tables, was sung to at Christmas, was buried with weeping. The mazed were kept. That is not nothing. What? In most of the history of the world, that has been the whole of the pharmacy. Keep the mazed. Keep them warm. Keep them working. Keep them among us. The pestilence comes back. You need to know this because they knew it, and knowing it is the last stone in the load they carried. It comes back in 1361. The second pestilence, the mortality of children they call it, because it falls cruelest on the young, on the very generation born into the emptied world. And your village loses 11 souls that summer, and one of them is a child from your own row, and the whole apparatus of dread stands up in every grown body in the parish overnight, entire, undiminished, as if the 12 years were a curtain and someone simply drew it back. You're 31 that summer. You dig again. Your hands remember the sexton's spade the way they remember the plough, instantly, hatefully. But the village holds. The watching at the lane goes up in a day this time. The nursing rota assembles itself without a word being needed, and when it passes, and it passes quicker and lighter, you understand that something else has been built in all of you alongside the fear, built out of the same material, a competence, a terrible fluency. Your generation knows how to do this. It should never have had to know, and it knows. And the knowing is a kind of armour and a kind of scar, and there is no line where one stops and the other begins. And it will come again, smaller, every decade or so, for the rest of your life and your children's lives and their children's. That is the truth of the later Middle Ages. Plague not as an event, but as a weather, a recurring season of dread. And every return will find the survivors older and readier and never, ever unafraid. Ask what that does to a civilization, 150 years of it. and you're asking the question historians are still asking. Why the art of the later medieval world fills up with skeletons that dance, with tombs carved as rotting corpses, with the Ars Moriendi, the best-selling how-to manuals on dying well. Why the piety turns so fierce and so bodily. Why the fashion turns extravagant and the feasting manic. It is not morbidity, or not only. It is a whole culture doing at the scale of centuries exactly what Alice did in the doorway that November evening, standing in the room with the frightened one, being ordinary near him, on purpose, until the blood believes. You go back to the market town in these middle years, and the town tells you the same story the village tells, only louder because towns say everything louder. You go with John when he is 12, his first time, the same 11 miles behind the same creaking cart. A better cart now, iron-shod wheels, another small wage of the tilted world. And you watch your son meet the town the way you met it at his age. The wall, the smell arriving before the gate, the roar of the market street and his face doing exactly what yours did. And that is a pleasure with very deep roots. But you also see what he cannot see, because he has no before to lay against it. You see the gaps, a row of shops off the high street standing shuttered, their signs weathering blank. The friary school half the size it was, you hear it too. The market's roar is a step lower than the roar in your memory. The way a choir sounds when a third of the voices have gone and the rest sing up to cover. And you hear the talk, the endless talk of the after years, from stall to stall like a bead passed hand to hand. That in London 60,000 souls before, some say half of them gone, though every teller tells it bigger. They dug great pits when the churchyards drowned, whole fields consecrated in a day, the dead laid in rows and tiers like goods in a warehouse, 5 deep, and a chaplain reading over each cartload as it came. That entire villages, out in the hungrier corners of the land, simply stopped. Not one soul left, or one, some old man or some child found living alone among the silent houses weeks after, and those places never woke again. The fields went back to thorn, and travellers on these roads, men will tell you, hurry past the standing gables at dusk and do not look at the windows, that the great works of the land halted where the hands died. Cathedrals standing half-built for a generation, their scaffolding rotting in place at the exact course of stone where the mason's lodge emptied, so that you can read the year 1349 in the walls themselves, a line in the masonry like a ring in a tree. And you hear the other stories, the ones about what fear did where the shelters failed, because they did not hold everywhere, and honesty owes you this. Word comes up the roads, garbled second-hand of the mad penances abroad, companies of men crossing the German lands, whipping themselves bloody in the market squares, hundreds together, singing, scourging, trying to take the sky's punishment onto their own backs before it could fall, and the church herself condemning them, and the crowds flocking to watch anyway, because terror on that scale must go somewhere, and darker than that, and this one you make sure John hears properly, standing by the smith's forge where you first heard the word pestilence, that in those same lands and in the south, terror went looking for someone to blame, and found the Jews, and burned them. Whole communities, in Strasbourg, in Basel, in Mainz, thousands of souls murdered by their neighbours on a lie about wells, while the Pope himself wrote from Avignon that the accusation was madness, that the plague slew Jew and Christian alike, and was not heeded. You tell your son this on the road home, in the plain flat voice your father kept for the few things he needed you to carry whole, and you watch him understand it, or begin to, that the pestilence was not the worst thing those years revealed. The pestilence was only a sickness. What people did with their fear, that was a choice, and it went both ways. And both ways are in every crowd, always, in every market square, in every century, waiting to see which way the ones beside them will turn. Your village turned toward the pot of broth and the watched lane and the neighbour's confession. It might not have. You want him to know it might not have, so that if his own year ever comes, he will know there is a turning, and that it is his. One more scene from the middle years, because you would want it kept. It is a September evening in, let us say, 1364. You are 34. There is a hill at the edge of the parish, the Beacon they call it, a long whale back of sheep pasture, the highest ground for miles, and you have been up it after strayed ewes. You keep sheep now, everyone keeps sheep now. Wool is the gold of the emptied land, and the ewes are found, and the light is going long and low and amber, and you stop at the top in the wind and turn and look, because a man almost never simply looks, and something this evening makes you look. The parish lies below you like something drawn. The church tower grey and small and yours. The two long streets smoke standing up from the roofs in threads. More roofs dark than there should be, still after 15 years. Some yards gone permanently to grass. You can read the whole story of your life in the pattern of the smoke and its absences, the way a man reads a scarred hand. The strips of the open fields, gold stubbled after harvest, seamed with their green balks. The churchyard from this height, a small green square, and you know every ridge in it, could put your finger on this air and touch Agnes, touch Hob, touch Father John, touch your grandmother, touch your week-old son. Beyond the parish, other towers, other smoke, the world repeating itself, parish by parish out to the blue edge of seeing, and every one of those towers stands over a green square exactly like yours, holding a year exactly like yours. And the feeling that comes to you on the beacon, in the wind, with the ewes complaining behind you, is not one feeling. It is the whole ledger open at once. Grief, permanent and quiet as the colour of your own eyes. Fear, folded but never discarded. A knife kept oiled in a chest. And under those, unreasonable, unkillable, the thing that has carried every generation of your kind across every century of ruin. The smoke is rising. The stubble is cut. The ewes are found. The bell will ring the Angelus in a little while, 3 and 3 and 3 and 9, and down there in one of those threads of smoke Alice is stirring a pot, and children who did not exist when the world ended are arguing about whose turn it is to fetch water. You stand on the hill until the light is nearly gone. Then you go down, because supper is supper, and the years go over the village like weather, and you grow old in them, old for your world, past 50, past 60, thick-knuckled, slow to straighten, your thumb split now a permanent seam, your back a map of every field you ever ploughed. Alice's hair goes grey in a wing at the temple first, then everywhere. Her hands stay strong, her feet stay freezing. The treaty of the shins holds for 40 years. Your children marry into the village and the next villages. Your daughter Agnes has a daughter, and they name that one Alice, and the names go around and around like the seasons, which is how your people do eternity. And to the young ones, this is the last thing to see, and then we will let the dark come. To the young ones, the great dying is a story. They handle it lightly, as the young handle everything. They know the year 1349 the way you knew Crécy, a word the old men go quiet at. Sometimes at the fire a grandchild asks you straight out. Children will ask anything. Was it true that the bell stopped, that you dug the graves, and you look into the fire for a while, and the room goes very still the way rooms have gone still around such questions since your own grandmother's day, and mostly what you say is what old Simon said. We were all there, and some nights, rare nights, you say a little more, a spoonful more, because you have learned this too over a lifetime among the mazed, that the stone in the field does not move, but it can, very slowly, over years, be shown to the young ploughmen so that they at least know where not to break a share. Let me give you one last day then, not a great day, the opposite of a great day. Because if this night has been about anything, it has been about what ordinary days are made of and what they cost and what they hold. And the best way to leave a life is through one of its plainest doors. It is a November evening, far along in your years, the 1370s, if anyone were counting, and no one in your house is counting. The day has been short and the colour of pewter, and you have spent it at winter's small, deep work. The work your hands can still do and love doing, because there is a mercy built into a labouring life that nobody tells you about when you're young and resenting it. The work shrinks as you do, and at every size there is work that fits. You spent the morning in the barn with your son John, who runs the land now. It is years since anyone pretended otherwise. Dressing seed grain for the spring, the two of you working the winnowing sheet in the doorway draught, tossing and catching, the good grain falling with a sound like heavy rain onto the heap, and the chaff smoking away sideways on the cold air in a glittering haze. And the rhythm of it is one of the 10,000 rhythms your body owns outright. And you can do it while talking, and you can do it while not talking, and mostly, these days, you and John do the second, which is its own conversation, and has been for years. You spent the afternoon at the fireside with the harness, always the harness. Leather is a lifetime's argument you never finally win, with the awl and the waxed thread, and the smell of tallow and neat's foot, working a new strap end where the old one wore through, punching each hole with the awl braced against the pad of your thumb the way your father braced it, feeling the punch go through with that small giving pop, drawing the thread down snug, wax dragging on the fibres, 6 stitches, 8. Your hands slow now and crooked at 3 of the knuckles, but still, in this one small country of straps and awls, entirely wise. Firelight is kind to old hands. It shows the work and hides the ears. And now it is the evening, and the household draws in the way a fire draws in when the logs settle. Alice at the pot. Because Alice at the pot is the fixed star the rest of the room turns around, grey-winged, straight-backed, tasting the pottage off the wooden spoon with the exact critical frown she was already using at 17. Your granddaughter Alice, small Alice, 10 years old, quick as a wren, is on the bench beside you, winding wool from a skein you hold stretched between your 2 lifted hands, and she winds fast and chatters faster, an unbroken silver thread of talk about the miller's dog and the frost and what the priest said and whether the pig knows its name, and you say mum at the right places and the wool comes off your hands turn by turn, a faint repeated tug, 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 the gentlest work in the world. An old man being used as a tool by a child, which is very close to the whole point of everything. Supper is pottage. Supper was always pottage. There is bacon in it, and good bread beside it. The bread of these late years, more wheat in it than your childhood ever saw. And when a piece of that bread slips from small Alice's hand and lands on the rushes, You watch, without a word, what happens. She picks it up at once, brushes it, eats it. Nobody taught her that as a rule. She drank it out of the air of the house, out of your air, out of your mother's air, and your mother had it from 1316. The famine your grandmother would not describe is at this table tonight, 70 years on, in the reflex of a girl who has never in her life been truly hungry. And it does not hurt her at all. It is just an heirloom now, a habit with the grief dried out of it. The way a shell is a storm with the storm gone. That is the other thing time does with what the years put into people. Some of it, in the end, it hands down as nothing worse than carefulness. After supper, the last offices of the day, in their unchangeable order, the order that has held this house together through everything the century could throw at it. John goes out with the lantern to the beasts, and the cold comes in through the open door and the smell of the byre with it, warm and animal, and the door shuts, and you note, you always note, that the shutting of a door is now, most nights, only the shutting of a door. Small Alice is prayed and kissed and sent up the ladder to the loft where the children sleep, protesting the eternal protest, negotiating her nightly treaty of one more story and losing it, as she loses it every night, to her grandmother's single raised eyebrow. The fire is banked. The great ceremony, the oldest ceremony, Alice raking the embers together and setting the curfew over them, the couvre-feu, the fire cover, the clay dome that has given its name to the hour itself, and the room's light dies back from gold to a dim breathing red at the seam of the dome, and the room's warmth banks with it, folding itself away until morning, and the Angelus rings, out there in the dark from the tower, 3 strokes, and 3, and 3, and 9. A different sexton now, a man who was not born when Roger died, but the rope is the same rope's descendant, and the bell is the same bell, the bell that counted your grandmother out, and Agnes, and Hob, the bell that was silenced in the terrible June and given back its voice, and it says, tonight, what it has said every ordinary night of your life, which is the only sermon that matters. Nothing is wrong. And the whole village, in 40 firelit rooms, pauses and murmurs and crosses itself, and you murmur with them, standing by your own bank fire, an old man and an old woman alone in the sudden quiet, and Alice's hand finds yours in the near dark, dry and warm and calloused along the fingertips still after everything, from the shuttle, and neither of you says anything, because after 50 years there is nothing that needs the long way round. Then bed. The mattress rustles. The blanket is wool and heavy and smells of you both and of lanolin and faintly of smoke, the smell of the whole of your life in one breath. Alice's back settles against your chest, and her feet, which are freezing, arrive against your shins, and you make the sound you have made about this for 50 years. And she ignores it as she has for 50 years, and the treaty holds. Overhead, small feet in the loft go still. The mice run their dry, secret roads in the thatch. Out in the byre a beast shifts its weight and sighs like a bishop. The wind tries the door, once, without conviction, and gives up. And you lie in the black in the listening hours, and the listening is soft now. Hear the difference. The boy in the field heard hoofbeats and armed himself. The young man heard his sister through a wall and could not move. The gravedigger heard silence where the bell should be, and flinched at figures as doorways. That man is not gone. None of them are gone. You carry them all, a whole company of yourselves, and on the bad nights, and there will be bad nights until the last night, they still stand up in you one by one. But tonight is not a bad night. Tonight, The dark is just the dark, and the sounds are just the house, and the listening drifts and slows and lets go of its post one finger at a time, the way your hands let go of the plough at the end of a furrow. You are warm enough, you are fed enough, you are safe enough, and you of all men know exactly what that word is worth. Know it is a candle in a wind, and have decided long ago on the hill in the September light that a candle in a wind is not nothing. It is in fact everything anyone has ever had. You have Alice's heart going steadily under your arm. You have children under this roof and children under other roofs, and a name that will go around and around. You have a barn with seed in it, and a strap mended by your own hands, and a village around you that has kept you as you have kept it, all the way through the end of the world and out the other side. That's more than most souls in the long history of souls have gone to sleep holding. That's enough. The sounds of the village grow fainter, or maybe you're just listening less. Somewhere down the street a dog barks twice at nothing and thinks better of it. The last ember settles under the curfew with a small ceramic tick. The wind moves over the thatch of 40 roofs, over the church tower, over the green square where everyone waits so patiently, over the strips lying open to the frost, over the beacon standing black against the stars, and finds nothing anywhere that needs doing before morning. Tomorrow there will be the beasts and the seed and the harness and the small deep work of winter. Tomorrow there will be small Alice and the skein and the silver thread of talk. Tomorrow the bell will ring the hours over the living and the dead alike, 3 and 3 and 3 and 9. But that's tomorrow. Tomorrow always comes soon enough. Right now there is just this, the dark, which is just the dark, the house breathing around you, the cold feet against your shins, faithful as the seasons, the long slow loosening that begins at the eyes and moves down through the jaw, the shoulders, the old aching hands, unknotting them finger by finger, laying them open at last. Let it come then. Let sleep take you the way the tide takes a boat that has been well tied. Nothing dramatic, nothing to fear, just a lifting and a rocking and the knots holding. Let the village fade. Let the bell fade. Let the listening finally, fully, stand down from its watch, because the watch is kept now by others, and the fire is covered, and the door is barred, and everyone you can still protect is under this one roof, breathing. You've earned this rest. Not tonight's rest only. All of it. Every night of it back down all the years. Take it. Centuries will pass. The village you know will change beyond recognition. The open fields will be hedged and swallowed. The strips will vanish under grass and under streets. The last ox team will be unyoked, and the plough will go on without oxen, without hands, without song. The houses of wattle and thatch will fall and melt back into the earth they were raised from, until nothing marks them but a greenness in a summer field, seen from the air by machines you could not dream. The pestilence itself will be run to ground at last, its cause found, smaller than a grain of chaff and broken. And there will come a time, hard as this is to believe, when a child with fever is simply given a medicine and gets up and goes out to play and no bell rings. But the church tower will still be standing, in an astonishing number of places, your actual tower, your actual bell. And people will still live where the village was, and work and marry after harvest, whether or not they call it that, and lie awake in the dark sometimes with their hearts going like drums at a sound that was only a door, because that too will still be with them. The instrument does not change, and the world will keep finding new ways to play it, And they will still do, on their worst nights, the only thing that has ever truly worked. The thing your whole mazed and magnificent century did without a single theory. Stay near each other. Be ordinary near each other, on purpose, until the blood believes. Some things don't change. The human heart doesn't change. It is the same instrument in the ploughman and in you. The very one beating now, slower and slower, in the warm dark where you're listening to this. And the need for rest at the end of a long day, the need for one safe hour where the listening can stand down and the hands can open, that doesn't change either. Not in 600 years, not ever. So let the world fade now, all of it, theirs and yours. Let the noise quiet. Let your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop. The fire is covered. The door is barred. The bell has rung. Nothing is wrong. Sleep the way Wat sleeps, in the black and rustling quiet, with everything he loves within the sound of his own breathing, 600 years ago and right now, both at once, both true. You've earned this rest. Take it, and dream of whatever dreams may come. Good night.